great opportunity to be here, and I've thought long and hard about the story I want to share. And since this is really about reading, it's about stories and literacy and what it can mean in the context of a family, I'd like to share a story about my family. I'm from a family of 9. My oldest sister is almost 20 years older than I am. So I'm almost the age of some of my nieces. And my own sons are the ages of my great nieces and my great nephews. So it makes for a very interesting gathering. Now I'm number 7. There's a brother, and then there's Laverne. We call her Peaches. She is the aunt from heaven. And she is the favorite aunt of all the nieces and all the nephews. She is our very own Mary Poppins. As if by magic, when a child wants gum, she has it. When she comes to visit, she opens the trunk, and there are toys. And of course, it is the perfect toy. She is indeed, as my son says, she has kid pheromones. And no matter where she is, they seek her out, sit beside her, and refuse to go with anyone else. Well, once my own children were teenagers, my brother, in his late 40s, had one more child. And since my sister doesn't have any children, I saw this as my very own opportunity, my last opportunity to be the favorite aunt. I want to tell you, I was not succeeding. My little niece is named Kendra. And when she would see her Aunt Laverne, it was a Kodak moment. Kendra would spot Aunt Laverne as she stepped out of her car in that perfectly manicured shoe. Kendra would stretch her arms wide and run to Aunt Laverne, of course, passing me on the way. And as I saw my opportunity slip away, I was in great despair, because no matter what I did, it did not impress Kendra. But one day, Aunt Laverne said, Kendra, let your Aunt Jeanette tell you a story. Kendra was about 4 years old. And there I sat in the chair. She came over, sat on my lap. And I began to tell her the story of the Gunny Wolf. The Gunny Wolf is an African-American version of Little Red Riding Hood. And of course, in my version of the Gunny Wolf, Kendra was the little girl. And she was going to visit her Grandma Warren in the country, who lived in the woods. And her Grandma Warren does live in the country, and she does live in the woods. So it was very believable to Kendra. And I told her that story. And at the end of the story, Kendra sat in my lap for a moment, and she looked up at me with those big, wide eyes and said, tell me that story again. Oh. And of course, my heart melted. And I told her the story again, and when I finished, she said, would you tell me that story with my cousin Annalise in it? And so now there were 2 heroines, and Annalise. And when I finished that, would you tell me that story with my mom and my daddy in it? And so there was another version. That one day, I probably told that story to her at least 10 times. And at the end of the day, my relationship with Kendra was very different. While I can't say that I was number 1 on her list, I did make my way to number 2. And every time Kendra would come to visit, she'd ask me to tell her that story until she could tell the story to me. And she and I went on to share books and stories and Scrabble and games until she began to think that I was her very own. About a year and a half ago, I began to date, and Kendra was very upset. Because now there was competition. She wasn't the only one vying for my attention and my affection. And she even wrote me a very, very long letter detailing her displeasure with the fact that all of my time was no longer spent with her. Kendra is 10 years old now, and she is indeed a wonderful child, and our whole relationship with her is very different, all because of that one day when her favorite Aunt Laverne, said, Kendra, let Aunt Jeanette tell you a story. And that is the power of stories.
Yes.